Welcome to Andy Ari On3, and after talking about lawsuits and court cases and whatnot for much of the show yesterday, we're back to football. Actual football. We got to break down Ari's projected CFP bracket, which is very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Because it's one of those things like...
Not very stupid?
I don't think it's stupid. I think this season is so wide open. Like, anybody who comes in with a defined idea, like, this team's definitely going to be in the playoff and this team's definitely going to win the national title. Like,
it's so hard. It is so hard.
Yes.
It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. We'll talk about it.
Well, and the thing is, like, I'm prepping for a show we're doing later this week with Clark Brooks, the stat cat, who did his top 100 most impactful players based on advanced stats and film study. And we may be way off not having Indiana back in the playoff. I was looking. They have a ton of really good players returning. So it is, there's a lot to chew on, a lot to, because I was thinking about this because I have to do my projected playoff bracket later this week to come out next week. And I don't think I appreciated what you had to do to figure out how these teams are seeded, what they are, because you have to kind of go through the season and figure out like who they lose to, and like you have to. And
I'm going to try to remember who all that was because I didn't show my work, so that's going to be challenging. But yes, I went through the schedules to see who they were playing, and who they were losing to,
because there's certain groups of teams, like certain combos of teams in the SEC and the Big Ten. They're just not going to all make the playoff because they'll lose to each other.
Yes. And some of them have challenging non-conference games. And like, if you go look, and we'll get into this, but like LSU was challenging because LSU, the way I have it set up right now, has rematches against two teams that they played in the regular season, which was difficult. But I didn't know what the bracket would look like as I seeded it. I just did it after. You go 1 through 12, and then you put the bracket together.
And we'll talk about that because you used last year's seeding rules, which are in effect as far as we know, but may not be by the time we get to it. So it's fascinating how all this works. It amazes me, where we've gone from there's two teams that can win the national title 5 years ago to there's like 10 teams that can win the national title.
You know what's crazy is, as I was thinking about this as I was doing it, if we were to do the same exercise with the same playoff bracket in 2017, I think filling out the actual bracket would have been more difficult because you wouldn't have known who to put between 5 and 12 back then. But getting to the Final Four would have been the easiest thing in the entire world. And like getting to the Final Four now is difficult. So, and
I remember how controversial that was because you had Alabama making the playoff, even though they'd lost to Auburn. And like Auburn would have been in the playoff that year because they beat Alabama and Georgia at the end. They just lost to Georgia in the SEC title game.
If you did the exercise before the season, it would have been more difficult to identify the middle tier teams. It would have been easier to figure out who actually had a chance to win it. Whereas when you're going through this exercise, it's hard enough to pick who you think is going to make the playoff. But then when you're projecting games that are happening in January between two teams that are very good, there's a lot of games in there that can be decided by 3 points. And that's not always the case, or was the case back in the old blowout playoff, especially in the later rounds. So like Clemson making the national title game in my bracket, they could lose to a team in the second round by 3 because their spreads are going to be less than a touchdown in every game they play. So it's just definitely difficult, and I just leaned on what I always lean on, and we'll get into it. But like, I feel pretty good about it. There is one team in there that I'm might be a little remorseful for, and I need you to talk me off the edge because I know you're high on that team. So we'll talk about through it, but I feel pretty good about I like this one.
We do have last one. Little news to cover. Little news to cover. Congratulations to Nick Saban, who's good at everything. He won an Emmy last night for outstanding personality / emerging on-air talent. Emerging is a little misleading, I think, since Nick Saban's been in our lives for decades. But he was fantastic on game day. Well-deserved Emmy, but it's one of those things. It's like, okay, he's already the best college football coach of all time. Like, does he have to be great at this too?
It always, you know what it made me think of? It like marvels at like people who win Oscars and Emmys, or people that are so good at, like, Donald Glover blows my mind. Like, Donald Glover, good actor, he's a hilarious stand-up comedian, and like is a good rapper.
And a great rapper.
Like it's just like, how can you be that? Like, it takes people their entire lives to master. You know how hard it is to become famous in any individual category. Like, I don't think people appreciate, like, you might not like a certain type of music, or you might not like an artist, but like the talent that it requires to actually break through and become famous, I think is unfathomably hard. Like, would you say it's harder to become a celebrity in like the arts than it is to be a pro athlete? Because I think it is.
I think they're both very hard. I think there's probably fewer spots in terms of, I guess there's more spots now because we don't have a monoculture really anymore. But yeah,
there's a lot of like famous hot girls that are just hot. Like, but like, I mean, like actually being somebody who wins a Grammy. Like, I don't think people appreciate that.
I saw an Instagram video of Jordan Mailata singing Tennessee Whiskey to Chris Stapleton. And if you haven't heard Jordan Mailata sing, this is the Eagles starting left tackle. He has the voice of an angel. And Chris Stapleton is sitting there like, wait, you're pushing NFL edge rushers around and you can sing this song as well as I can? What world are we living in here?
Did you know that my wedding song with Brit is Tennessee Whiskey?
First date in Nashville, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm pretty much of all. So like, I don't know. I'm sure.
God, here we go.
Caught up on this, but
stop trying to butter up Vol Twitter. They're going to turn on you.
Andy, they scared me. Okay, just let me overcome this fear. Okay.
You know who they do? You know who's not scared of Vol Twitter? Nick Saban. Not scared in the least. Beat Tennessee a lot. And
yeah, I mean, he was.
Now he's got an Emmy.
Can we be honest about it though? Like, I thought he did a tremendous job, and the coolest thing about Nick Saban was that we saw, or a lot of people saw, a side of him personality-wise that they didn't know was in there, because he's very funny too. And I just thought that like finding somebody to be in that position, like there's nobody on earth that you would rather hear from than Nick Saban when it comes to both football and football-related topics. And like, I know, Fox Big Noon used Urban Meyer in that type of category, where it's like they have some former coach who won national titles in there, like breaking down film and talking about the game. But in terms of like the actual off the field conversation, I think any coach could go on to game day and break down tape for people, because that's what they do all day. But I think there's a certain level of respect and inherent trust that people have in Nick Saban to break down the issues, because he had to live through them. And not only did he live through them, he adapted through them so well that you trust his expertise in just about any topic. I thought he was tremendous. And I'm not a game day person anymore. Game day for me, and I know this might be sacrilegious, has always been the thing that's on in the background as I'm doing the last final things before the games start. Like, it's more of like a pre-game like ritual more than it is like, do you sit down and like watch it? Like, I never just sit down and watch it, but like in the segments that he had that I caught, I thought he was tremendously good.
He prepares really well for this. And I actually asked him about it. This was before the season started. I was at SEC Media Days talking to him, and because we'd already seen him some on TV, and it was clear how much prep he was doing. And somebody, some people behind the scenes at ESPN had told me how much information he requests when he's doing his prep, and it's a lot. It's I need this tape of this guy. I need to know about this guy. I need this guy, and they're like, whoa. Okay, hold on here. You're supposed to be coasting into retirement here. And I asked him about that. He's like, look, if I'm going to do a job, I'm going to do it right.
Yeah. Would you expect anything different from the greatest coach of all time? Somebody who's going to attack every challenge with everything he's got. I think that's part of the reason why he's the GOAT, man. And you know what's so crazy too, is that like everybody, whether you love Alabama or hate Alabama, or love the SEC or hate the SEC, like he was so good that like there is no debate about who the greatest coach of all time. Like, it's just like everybody uniformly agrees that Nick Saban is the greatest. And it's like, when you think about other sports and other great figures, like you're going to have a Mahomes versus Tom Brady debate. You're going to have a LeBron and Jordan debate. Like you always, like even like Michael Jordan, the single most impactful athlete of my generation and my lifetime, and maybe most of our lifetimes, there's a debate right now about whether he's better than LeBron. It's like, do you know how great you have to be at your craft in sports to be the undeniable, undisputed GOAT? Like, has people like thought about that?
I think that's a column right there. Maybe that's your congratulations to Nick Saban for winning an Emmy column right there. Because you're right.
I need to write
something. There is no debate in college football. Like, you can talk about Bear Bryant. You can talk about, like, Ara Parseghian had such a short career, but so much success packed into it. And it is Bobby Bowden, Joe Paterno, like all of these guys. But nobody did it in a more dominant fashion than Nick Saban.
You're a college football history buff, so save me from ignorance here. But like, I don't, obviously I respect the old time coaches because, being great is being great, and everybody played by the same rules then as they do now. But I just perceive it, because of the scholarship limits, to be much more difficult to do what he did in this era than it might have been in 1960.
Theoretically, much more difficult. And also, there's the fact that they kept changing rules to stop him, and he kept adjusting to that. So, and then the game changed. He adjusted. You saw where other coaches didn't adjust and where they fell short. So, yeah, I think there's no question. He is the best college football coach of all time. It's not close. There's not really a,
Chad doesn't light up when you say that. Like, that's just,
there's not an argument.
He's going to say that,
which is
crazy.
Now, that actually brings us to our other news story that we need to talk about, which is involving the other greatest coach of all time. Check. He is the greatest NFL coach of all time. Maybe there is debate about that now. And I kind of wonder if everything that's going on now, which really has nothing to do with what he's going to do at North Carolina, I think, is changing that conversation about whether he's the greatest NFL coach of all time. But so you and I said it when that CBS This Morning interview happened. It was like waving a flag, like come look into the Bill Belichick, Jordon Hudson relationship more. And the New York Times dropped its big story yesterday. And the big nugget in that story was they report that Jordon Hudson has told people they're engaged. Now, listen, we're not Entertainment Tonight. Did I date myself there, Ari?
Yeah, I think so. Is that TMZ
okay.
before TMZ?
Yeah, but I just like John Tesh and Mary Hart better.
The E channel, right?
Well, Entertainment Tonight was on NBC.
Oh.
Or I think it was syndicated. But the E channel, yeah, we had Ted Casablancas on the E channel. We could do that too.
This is what I'm talking about. Like, all this stuff. Like, I don't know who you're talking about. I watched the E channel.
I used to watch little E Entertainment television back in the day.
You know the hosts' names from obscure E television show from like 20 years ago.
Because Ted Casablancas came on my TV a lot right before the Howard Stern television version.
E True Hollywood Story was a thing. That's what I remember from it. But that was that was the celebrity gossip channel, though, wasn't it? It
was.
Right.
So now we're in that world with Bill Belichick. Like, this is all we talk about with him. We don't talk about football. Like, people are so fascinated by this relationship. And look, I don't care who you love. I don't care who you marry.
Right.
Nobody's breaking any laws here. I've turned the other way on this, Ari, because everybody's like, I don't know if he coaches a game at North Carolina, blah, blah, blah. I think Bill Belichick has already buttoned this up. Like, I saw the Good Morning America interview with Michael Strahan. He has shunted Jordon Hudson to the side professionally. Like, all of the professional stuff that she was trying to do with Bill Belichick or attached to Bill Belichick, that's been cut off now, it seems. And if that's the case, then his personal relationship is his personal relationship. And I don't know that it's going to have much effect on the football.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason why we ever cared was because of the professional part. Like, I don't care who he marries or who he, whatever. Like, I don't even care if they're engaged. Although I will say that the single most alarming thing about this entire story was the real estate accumulation. And if they end up getting married, then that might make that feel better. Because that felt a little off to me.
That was a little weird. Yeah. But it's crazy because you have this giant New York Times kind of style section story, which is not what you'd expect to be about Bill Belichick as he starts his college football career. But also TMZ, which this is their stock in trade. They start dropping stories yesterday like, oh, Bill Belichick's boat got a fresh paint job. Does that mean he's engaged? And then they had this incident report from a venue in Massachusetts where there was a party where I guess the daughters of Bill Belichick's ex-girlfriend were DJing, and Bill Belichick's ex-girlfriend saw Jordon Hudson there and confronted her. Like, it was wild. I read the whole... I felt terrible reading the entire thing. I was like, why am I doing this to myself? But it was like, after reading it, like, in that case, Jordon Hudson didn't really do anything wrong. She was basically getting bullied by 3 ladies. So,
yeah, I need to go back and read all that stuff. The only thing that I care about with this is, like you said, I care about like her being at North Carolina's football building and meddling into things that, don't pertain to her, and real estate. But the real estate thing was a one-off story that we can just kind of let go into the past, I guess. But like I am super fascinated in Jordon Hudson's impact on his coaching and his presence at North Carolina. I am 0% interested in like their love life.
No. Look, love who you love. You want to get married, get married. Don't get married, don't get married. I don't care.
Yeah.
But
also,
it's
people get married to the wrong
but I will
age,
we pointed this out because Jordon Hudson fashioned herself as a PR publicity expert and committed the single biggest faux pas you can commit by saying we're not talking about that in that CBS This Morning interview.
Not talking about
because
this.
all she did was invite everyone to dig into their relationship. Like, if she never does that, there is no giant New York Times story on the two of them.
Not talking about this.
I'm sorry, Jordan. We have to talk about it because people are interested, and it's your fault. Congratulations. You got what you want, I think. Maybe not.
Also, that'd be kind of a banger of a wedding. You think Gronk goes to it? You think Tom Brady goes to that wedding?
I know Gronk does, because Gronk doesn't. Like, Gronk and Julian Edelman definitely go.
Yeah, Gronk's like open bar.
Well, Gronk's deal, like, he hasn't spent a dime of his NFL money. All he spends are his endorsement dollars. So he's just, open bar is definitely attracting him.
As somebody who has met him and went to college with him at the same time, I will tell you that like Gronk is unapologetically who he is. And I'm not going to pretend like I know the guy personally, but I do know enough stories, and I've been in the same room as him in a non-football professional environment enough to know in my life that the guy is just a happy-go-lucky guy who just like wants to party and is like there for everybody. Like, I think like he's
what a life. What a life. And it's a great way to be. It's a great way to be. It helps if you're 6'6", 260 pounds, run really fast, and having a maniacal work ethic.
I was at a party in college once, and Gronk came through the front door, did a keg stand, and then walked out the front door.
What a life. What a life.
Yeah, I would have loved to see how good Arizona would have been if he didn't get injured his last year. They would have been pretty good. I mean, he was really good in college. And by the way, like, my first real beat in my life was the Arizona football team, where he like torched the defense all year.
All the time. All right, so let us move into the actual football. There is an Arizona team that would like to be in the college football playoff. I think Arizona would too, but Arizona State was in it last year. Not in your CFP projection, though. You have BYU coming out of the Big 12. Let us talk about your CFP projection, and we're going to go down the list for the folks who are listening in podcast form, because I want to make sure everybody gets the full scope of this thing. So, Ari, why don't you take us through the seeding and the first round matchups?
Okay, so the first step in doing this always starts with who you think is going to win the conferences, right? I don't know how you do it. That's my process. So I think Texas, and continue to think that Texas is going to win the national title. I've thought that since January based on the players that they have on their team. So I put Texas number 1 as the SEC champion. Then Penn State, which got a lot of pushback, I put as the Big Ten champ, because I can't rank them number 1 on my poll and then feel like they're not going to win the Big Ten. Now, will it happen that way? I don't know. But this I had in my brain as them going to Columbus and losing and that being their only regular season game that they lost, and then them beating Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, which then drops Ohio State to 5. I had Clemson as my ACC champ, and BYU as my Big 12 champ, which, by the way, if you've listened to the show at all the last week, don't get mad at me. I don't know what the hell's going on in that conference. Okay. There are 5 or 6 teams that are within a game on the over-under win totals on that coming season. So I like BYU, and I like a lot of the pieces they have in place. I like their quarterback. I like some of their skill position players. Worry about their D-line a little bit, but like I think they have as good of a chance of winning the Big 12 as anybody. Least firm pick I have, though, in terms of like who's going to make it.
And I think I would imagine everybody feels that way as you try to handicap that conference, because
it's like everybody's like Arizona State's going to win. What are you talking about? Like the Arizona State got picked to finish last year. What are you talking about? You don't know who's going to win the Big 12. Nobody knows who's going to win the Big 12. I really, really like BYU's coach, and I like their pieces that they have on offense. They got really good running backs. They've got a great, reliable quarterback who's won a lot of close games. You're going to have to do that. That was my analysis. But, if someone else wins it, like, what am I?
I mean, if it's Texas Tech or Kansas State or Iowa State, like, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised.
Yeah. It could be literally it could be Oklahoma State for all I know. Like, I don't know what the hell's going on there.
Well,
like,
we're predicting them, because their over-under's 5.5, which means they're going to win 11.
I mean, look at this.
That's usually how that works.
What if Devin Dampier turns into Michael Vick this year? Like, Utah could win it. I don't know.
Yep.
So, to me, it's if you want to get wound up about BYU, then go for it. But like I'm telling you right now on this podcast, I'm not that firmly entrenched in that pick. It was the best I could do in an impossible situation. 5 was Ohio State, because I think their first loss of the year, or second loss of the year, comes in the Big Ten championship game. But last year, they rewarded conference championship attendees. And I think that if they're a 10-2 team or an 11-2 team with a loss in the Big Ten championship game to a team that's only lost once, they'd be 5. 6, I have LSU, and you know how I feel about LSU. 7, River, put it back up and help me out here. 7 is Notre Dame, because they've got the best offensive line, or one of the 2 best offensive lines in the country. I think CJ Carr is going to be a stud. Jaden Greathouse, you know the names. I think they're going to be very good on defense, and their schedule is manageable. 7 seems like a right solution for them. 8, Georgia, because I think that they are going to make the playoff, and they could potentially even be the first 3-loss team to make the playoff, because I don't think that they've gotten the Georgia benefit of the doubt stuff washed out of their system. And I think that they're probably...
But you're not predicting them to be a 3-loss team, because they wouldn't be seeded 8 if they were.
No. I think they'll probably be a 2-loss team this year. A 2-loss team that I think we go into the postseason with some questions like last year. I think
this is one I want to talk to you about. When we finish telling everybody what the 12 teams are, I want to dig into the SEC teams.
What your take on Georgia is, because I'm like, they're going to be really good. Kirby Smart's the coach, and they've got a lot of really good players, but I do have some questions about the team's explosive offensive ability, and I don't know if the defense will be quite as good as it's been in the past. But, maybe I'm high like Raymond thinks. Oregon's 9. I think that's the 3rd best team in the Big Ten this year, between Ohio State and Penn State, and that's probably where you slot that team. 10, I have Illinois, and this is the one that I struggle with second most behind BYU, which is, on paper, we think that this is going to be a very good team. Whether or not it actually matriculates into them being a 10-2 or an 11-1 team, I think is kind of I looked back at some of their games last year, the Rutgers game specifically. They could have lost some of the games that they didn't.
The Purdue games, the glaring red flag.
So like there were times where the coin flipped heads on them last year, and if it flips tails on them, they're firmly out. But I'm going to give Brett Bielema the benefit of the doubt, especially considering the fact that he is one of the few coaches that was able to retain basically his entire roster. 11, Alabama, because that was my they're really, really talented. They're probably going to find a way to win 10 games type of a deal. Put them at number 11, and then 12 was Boise. Could have put Memphis there, but Boise seems like the safe bet with the group of 5. So that's where we're at.
So I want to talk about the SEC teams first, because I'm fascinated by how this has to work. Like, because I'm reading this and I'm like, now I'm piecing together how the season had to go to get here. So
Right.
Texas wins. We can say Texas is a one-loss team, probably is likely given their schedule. They're at Florida, they're at Georgia, but it is a somewhat more manageable schedule than most SEC teams. But they are also at Ohio State. So,
Yeah.
but they wouldn't be ranked number one unless they are undefeated or only one loss, probably.
Well, we don't know that for sure. This is what I struggle with. It's like you don't think that the SEC champ might just be number one, even if
they have two losses.
Team? You don't think
no,
so?
because the Big Ten champs probably. Now maybe the SEC Big Ten champs both have 2 losses, but
like
I don't know. I mean, I think probably if it's Texas, unless they lost to Ohio State, which they might, but unless they lost to Ohio State, I think you're probably talking about a 12-1 Texas.
Yeah.
In that scenario.
Yeah.
So,
but also losing to Ohio State on the road by 3 and then going through
wouldn't
losing one
especially if Ohio State's really good.
I still think that they'd have a pretty good chance of being the 1 seed if they come out of the SEC as champs, especially if they beat Alabama or Georgia in the SEC championship game or something. Like there's definitely multiple paths for the SEC to be the number 1 overall seed than other conferences have.
I think it's more likely they have to be 12-1. The way you've got this ranked, that means they beat LSU in the SEC title game.
Yes.
So, yeah, producer River noting Texas does not. That's not true. Texas does play one of the other SEC teams that Hari has, and they play at Georgia. But, so Texas beats LSU in the SEC title game. LSU being the SEC title game probably means they beat Alabama.
Yes.
In the regular season and being ranked ahead of Alabama.
In the regular season and in the postseason. I gave Baton Rouge the most pornographic bracket I could have come up with. So LSU is probably in this scenario 11-2. Yes.
Or 10-3. Because I don't think the SEC championship game loss is going to hurt them that much in the seeding.
And the way that I looked at it too was that the way that I seeded it, they could have won or lost the Clemson game, and I think the seeds would be the same. So like it was like kind of like a way, like a get out of jail free card.
Right, because you have Clemson seated above them, and that you're not seeding Clemson there because of the seeding rule.
They won the ACC in my
right,
scenario.
But you're also saying they would have been probably number 3 anyway if they seeded it straight, right?
I think that if Clemson beats LSU and wins the ACC, and Clemson loses to LSU and wins the ACC, there's a high likelihood that they're 3 either way.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what happens against South Carolina too. So
it also depends too on like how the Big Ten and the SEC champs also do. But I assume I think this year that that would probably be a pretty safe proposition. So I guess I didn't put a hard line in the sand in terms of, but I had LSU winning the first game. I had LSU winning the opener in my bracket.
So LSU beats Clemson, LSU beats Alabama. So that's going to give them a mulligan there to lose to South Carolina or Florida or Ole Miss or one of those.
And that's why I have them at 6 because I don't have them like running through the schedule. And I just like realized too that what I have here is probably highly unlikely. I don't know that they would be able to beat Clemson and Alabama both twice. That would be an insane season. But so if you want to say
you beat them once, you can beat them twice.
No, I know.
So.
But like that's that. If you said LSU in order to make it, well, actually, I don't have Clemson winning. I don't know what I'm talking about. But beating Alabama twice would be difficult.
Yeah,
especially because I think there are games on the road. So it's
right. The regular season games in Tuscaloosa, you would actually have this game in Baton Rouge. This playoff game would be in Baton Rouge because LSU would be the higher seeded team. So I find that very interesting. And then you got Alabama. So Alabama has to be 10-2 in this one, I think.
Yeah, I think so. No, see, here's the thing. Like, I don't know about has to.
Well, no, okay. You have Georgia ahead of Alabama. I'm sorry. So the way you have it is Georgia has to win the Georgia Alabama game in this scenario.
Yes, 100%.
So Alabama has one loss to Georgia, and then they have another loss somewhere in there. And it's Georgia,
they would lose to LSU.
Okay, so that's right. So you'd have Alabama losing to Georgia and LSU, and then they make the playoff because they win. That actually seems like a very realistic scenario.
Yeah, because
very realistic.
when I was looking at the schedule, Andy, and you check me because it's always you're not able to talk about it out loud with somebody else while you're doing it. But I had them losing to LSU and Georgia and then winning the rest of their games. But if you look at the rest of their games, there's a chance at the end of the year that they will say they don't have any quality wins, which is what has them down lower in the seeding.
Right. They need Missouri and Tennessee and South Carolina to be good.
If they lose both of their premier games, then that's going to be a talking point in November. So I
still think they're getting in at 10-2, especially if those games are close.
Yeah, but
the Georgia and LSU games, like if that's close, I think they still get in. So that's very interesting to me because and now let's go back to Georgia. Let's look at Georgia's schedule because you've got them beating Alabama. Theoretically, we should assume they lose to Texas in this, and then they've probably lost.
They're both 10-2, but Georgia's 10-2 is markedly better, and they have a head-to-head win.
But it means that. But the thing is, it means their 2 losses are kind of bad.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm sorry. One of the losses is Texas in this, but then it means they lost to like Tennessee or Auburn or Ole Miss or Florida or Georgia Tech.
Yeah. Like I think that their 10-2 is similar to last year's 10-2.
Yeah, but they'll have a win against Alabama.
They'll have a quality win, and their schedule and their record strength will be better than Alabama's, which is the distinction between 8 and 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is fascinating. It absolutely fascinating. And I want to point out. So Ari used the current seeding rules, the ones that are in effect, as far as we know right now, where the top 4 ranked conference champs are the top 4 seeds and get the buys. So that's why BYU is the 4 seed. It may or may not be why Clemson is the 3 seed. We talked about that a second ago, but like, do you think Clemson can just be a top 4 seed?
Yes.
Like, even if they seed it straight, that Clemson
of course,
can.
have them in the title game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that like it's going to be hard for the ACC or the Big 12 to ever be a top 2 seed in this system as a projection without something going haywire in the other 2 conferences.
Well, here's the thing with Clemson that makes them unique in this.
They have 2 SEC teams on their schedule.
Right. And if they both happen to be good, like if LSU and South Carolina are both good in the SEC, like I doubt, like if Clemson beats them both, I doubt both of them could also make the playoff. But if Clemson beats them both, and then South Carolina is 9-3, and LSU is 10-2 or 9-3, like it will go a long way toward lifting. Like Clemson could be number 1 in the country
here's
in that
what
scenario.
Missing, I think, and what I try to consider, and I don't know. I know you're very high on Louisville, but it's possible that at the end of the year, Clemson, if they beat LSU, doesn't have another marquee win. Like if you look at their actual schedule, they have some tough games.
You're assuming South Carolina isn't good. Here's the ones.
South Carolina is just 8-4, which I think is probably the most likely outcome of the season. Like I don't know if you're assuming that South Carolina is going to be a playoff team, but if you think they're 8-4, I think beating them will look pretty, but I don't think it's going to boost them. Like
no, it's not. They would need South Carolina to be 9-3 or better.
Yeah,
including a loss to Clemson. Yeah. So, the other games that could help Clemson theoretically, but the other team has to do its part. I'd say Georgia Tech, SMU, Louisville. Those would be the ones within the ACC.
Maybe Duke too, to a certain extent, but I don't think that there's no like they start the year with a bang and they end the year with a bang, but there's no like middle of the season tentpole for your resume.
Yeah,
unless Louisville turns out to be as awesome as you think they might.
I think Louisville is going to be pretty good. I don't know about awesome, and also it's on the road. Louisville kicked the crap out of Clemson last year, so
but pretty good doesn't move the needle. We got to think about what moves.
I know. Let's move to the Big Ten because this is fun. This is so.
So you're with me though? Does that all seem very rational with the SEC?
It does. You definitely thought through, because this was my concern when we said we were going to do this, is if we didn't really pick our way through the schedules.
Oh, you have to. You can't do it without it.
It was gonna the chat was just gonna kill us because there were going to be lots of mistakes, and that can't happen.
It took me like 2.5 hours. This isn't like, I listed 12 teams and wrote it. Like it took me time.
Yeah, no, and you seeded them, like the way you seeded them makes sense. Like I can see the season playing out that way in the SEC. Yeah. So let's go to the Big Ten. you have Penn State as your number one and you're way too early. So you have Penn State winning the Big Ten, but obviously they've lost the game because they're not the number one seed. Who do we think Penn State loses to in the regular season? I think I have a good guess.
Yeah, they got a pretty big road game on November 1st. They probably might not win.
Yeah, that would be Ohio State.
And like this is the math here. I felt like I couldn't put. I feel like if I put Penn State as 5 or 6 in the seeding instead of 2, then I would look like an idiot / hypocrite for putting them number 1 in my poll.
Well, you definitely look like a hypocrite.
Like I didn't want. So like that's the thing that I struggle with, and I want your opinion on this. Can you? So like when you rank your top 25.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think a team is number 1 in May without thinking they're going to win the national title?
Yes.
Because
especially in this playoff format.
And I did that in this seeding because I had Texas 2 in my poll and Penn State number 1. And I didn't have Penn State winning the national title. So I think like on paper right now that Penn State probably has the best all-around team on paper. But whether or not I think that's going to mean they win a national title, I think this is a different exercise.
Yeah, can you win 3 in a row against that level of quality competition? Is different than, do I think you're the best overall team? Because some of it's stylistic.
Yeah. And
some
like
of it's
also
depth.
too, it's like, but if you put somebody number 1, that means you think they're the best team. So it's a very hard thing to do. But here's the thing I'll say.
But also there's just randomness in a situation where there's where a really good team has to play 3 other really good teams in a row.
Right. So Penn State, I'm a human being too, guys. Like I've watched James Franklin lose games all the time to top. Like I'm not like I'm immune to seeing what you see. So like last year I thought was they had a step stool to the semifinal, but I thought last year was a reasonably good positive step in the right direction for Penn State. Is that a fair thing? Like I know a lot of people go, well, they didn't play anybody, so it doesn't count. It's like I think that being a possession away from the national title game counts. Whether how they got there, that's the seeding. But I thought that they had a good step forward, and I thought that they, lost a transcendent tight end, but got marginally, if not significantly better at multiple position, including their biggest weakness. So I think they'll be very good on defense. I think they traditionally play Ohio State tough. They did last year. It was a 1-possession game for 90% of the game. I think they have a chance to split the series with them. But if you're asking me, are you certain they'd beat Ohio State in Indianapolis? No, come on. No, I'm not certain of that. Okay. So then Ohio State, I have as 5, and I think that you could make the same exact case of whether or not they beat Texas in the first game of the season. They could end up at 5 either way. So like you can decide however this works the best who won that game. But I think if they play a 3-point game, it will be a nice boost for the team that won, but I also think it will be a quasi boost for the team that lost in the end. And Ohio State will be, if they're 11-2 with a loss in the Big Ten championship game to a team they already beat, I think 5 is where they would land. And then they would be the beneficiary this year of the Penn State easy path to the quarterfinals. Or easy path to the semis, I should say. Sorry, first 2 rounds.
Is it bad that I'm secretly hoping the commissioners just come out and say we're going to seed it straight before I do this so it can look completely different?
I think that you should do what you like in this category, and then I'll let you go first when they change it.
Right, so we'll just do it again. We'll just run it back.
But
okay.
So here's the thing, though, that is interesting, and it dawned on me again. But if you look at Ohio State's path and you look at Penn State's path, Penn State in winning the Big Ten actually does the reverse to what it did last year, which is gives itself a harder playoff path because it won the conference. So like, it's like if Ohio State and Penn State play in the Big Ten in the same type of scenario,
so
that Oregon played it, but like they bit themselves this year after they get in this scenario, like Ohio State would probably want to lose that game because then they would get Boise.
Right. And this is what you have. You have essentially Penn State losing to Ohio State in the regular season and then beating them in the Big Ten championship game, which would make all of this make sense. Who's Ohio State losing to other than Penn State in the title game? There's one other loss on Ohio State's schedule. So what is it?
It doesn't have to be.
It could be Texas.
I mean, but there doesn't have to be. They could be undefeated.
Yeah, there does.
Game in B5.
There does. If Ohio State beats Penn State in the regular season and only loses to Penn State in the Big Ten championship game, I think it would be 5. I guess you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it wouldn't be one of the top 4 seeds because of the.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Trust me, I thought that through. I'm like, no, I'm not going to have them losing to Purdue on there. Like, it's like.
No, I'm glad you corrected me on that, because I think there's probably some people out there that are thinking the same thing. Like, you can't.
Even if
Ohio State's got to lose another game.
Lose that game, they're still 5.
Yeah. So you are predicting an Ohio State win at Michigan, because the chat is.
I am.
Like, okay.
Yeah. Listen, guys. Like, I know that Michigan fans are having a good time, and Buddy, revel in it, because that's what this sport's about. I don't think you're going to beat him 13 years in a row. I actually have a theory about Ryan Day. Do you want to hear it now, or should I save it for the season?
You can go ahead.
I think now that they won the national title and the monkey's off his back a little bit, I think that he might not be as tight as he's been in that game. I think that now that he's been able to have the summer tour on the Oprah Winfrey show, and people had, he was on Jimmy Fallon and stuff, and people have been celebrating him and they hoisted the trophy. I know that the Michigan game was a thorn in his side last year. I think that his pressure as a coach has been mitigated to a point where maybe he can just be himself more than the tight, wound up person that he is at the end of the year. And then that will change the dynamic of it. But, I don't know.
You mean they might go to Ann Arbor and just throw to Jeremiah Smith?
Yeah, they might just throw the ball to the best player in college football this year. I don't know.
Okay.
That last year, and I will say this, and I'm sure Michigan fans will probably agree, was the single most bizarre result I think I've ever seen in the sport. In terms of who the teams were, how the game played out, and how one coach allowed that to happen.
Yep. So let's go to Oregon. That is your last Big Ten team in this bracket, by the way. No Illinois, or no, you've got Illinois. I'm sorry. You got Illinois as well. You have 4 Big Ten teams. Yes, that's right. Sorry. So let's move to Oregon.
Ohio State can beat teams not named Michigan does not actually mean they can beat Michigan. That's true. That's true. But also Michigan lost the game 20 out of 21 years and now owns the rivalry. I gotta find this thing of what's true now isn't true forever, because that's
right. It's like the Michigan fans forgot that we were alive for the first 20 years of this century as well.
5 years ago, I wrote a story about how the rivalry wasn't fun anymore because Michigan wasn't even a competitive party in it. So wasn't that long ago, guys. And it's not like Ohio State stinks now. So the thought that Ohio State will go on the road and beat a team that might be 9-3 or 8-4 next year is found asinine, is crazy to me. But okay, go ahead, continue.
All right, let's talk Oregon, because this is a team that was the number 1 seed this year, undefeated regular season, won the Big Ten in its first year in the Big Ten, did lose a lot, brought a lot in. Dylan Thieneman from Purdue in the transfer portal, who I think will be a very impactful transfer. Isaiah World from Nevada at offensive tackle, probably going to be a very impactful transfer. Dante Moore takes over as a starting quarterback. So there's a lot here. The schedule is definitely manageable. They do go to Penn State. They have Indiana. They go to Iowa. And then you've got SC and Washington to close.
Yeah. And if we can throw the bracket back up, I just want to it's easy for me to visualize it. It's hard. Okay.
Yeah.
So 9 seed to me is a 2-loss team.
Yeah. That's what's that. Where are the losses? So we know one's to Penn State, because we said Penn State only lost once, and that was in Columbus. So where is the other loss here?
You know where
at Iowa?
Do you know where I put
Washington?
it in my brain when I was doing it? And I figured they might lose to somebody else. The road game at Iowa could be interesting, but I had them losing to Washington on the road because Washington was so good at home last year, and Damon Williams is badass.
I think that's fair. I think that.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this though, Ari, and now Indiana is a tricky one too. But they've got to come to Eugene. But I don't know. I might see 11-1. I might see Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. It's very this is one of those, as I do mine now, it's unfair to you because now I've gotten to pick yours apart.
Yeah, you're able to see it, visualize it in a different way. Yeah, but no, I struggle with this because here's where my issue was that you're not going to face. My issue was that I had Penn State number 1 in my preseason poll. And like, if you think that Oregon is, because if you think Oregon's going to go 11-1 this year, then that means that Ohio State, who beat Penn State in my bracket, would play Oregon in the Big Ten.
Right, you knock Penn State out of the Big Ten championship.
I didn't want to do that.
Actually, well, no, we have to figure out the tiebreakers on that because they would have 3.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, that's the reason why Penn State's 2 for me. Like, I wanted to stay strong in the point of like, hey, I think Penn State's going to be really, really good. What I do think would be interesting though is that if Oregon ran the table and didn't lose a second game, there would be a tiebreaker there, because one of their losses is at Penn State. But like, yes, this was tricky for me. But like, also too, all 3 teams will be very good. And like,
I love that the game it's set up. I love the Oregon at Georgia first round game, like, because it is
bracket came out great, by the way, in terms of like intrigue.
Storylines. Yeah. We always joke about the NCAA basketball tournament selection committee, seeding based on storylines, which, by the way, they don't do. If you've ever done the mock selection, like, you're not even thinking about who's playing who. But this game would be great just because of the way it bookends Dan Lanning's first game at Oregon. Dan Lanning's first game at Oregon was against Georgia in Atlanta, and it was this is how far you have to go. And it would be great to see, because I think, obviously, I don't think it would be a blowout win for Georgia in this case. I think it would be a really fun game. So you actually have Oregon winning this game and advancing.
Yeah. And I thought that was a salute to Dan Lanning. Well, also them taking the brunt of the seeding bus again for the second straight year. So like, yeah. I think that Oregon might have one of the best running backs in college football. I think we need to watch out for Mekhi Hughes. Obviously picked up an important transfer at the offensive line. Yeah, you already listed these. But one of the best safeties. Dante Moore's got a lot on his shoulders, but I think Oregon's going to be a very good football team this year.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. And now, okay, let's get to Illinois, because people don't like Illinois being in here. I get it.
Scared as hell on this one.
Well, they might not make it, Ari. Like, they're our trendy pick, but they just might not make it.
It just might not happen for them. And I feel like it. I feel like too many people think they're good.
I think Illinois, they probably are good, though.
Illinois could conceivably be 10-2 and be. This is where I had a hard time with the math, but conceivably could be 10-2. They're not going to beat Ohio State, although they do get it at home. They're not going to win that game, I don't think. So I thought that if they were to win the rest of their games, which I think that Illinois might be favored in all of them, if not most of them, if they have Duke, USC, and Wisconsin wins, and Indiana win, and that's
the at Indiana's. I think the at Indiana is going to tell us where we should be putting our trendy bucks in the Big Ten.
I wanted to put a 4th Big Ten team in there, and it could have been Michigan, and it could have been Indiana. I think we're going to know where we stand on September 20th. I actually think that might be a game worth going to, honestly, because that's just a fascinating big-time game and a big-time conference between 2 teams that don't typically play in those games in September.
Well, and it's we talk about how the playoff renders September games less meaningful, but this feels like a kind of a turning point for one of these.
Because it does feel like one of those games, it almost feels like you're playing for the 4th Big Ten slot in that game.
But I want to talk about
Michigan.
Really
good,
yeah. Can we talk about Michigan? Because the chat, and obviously we have a lot of Michigan fans in the chat, so I understand that. But they've basically said, why are you leaving Michigan out of this? And as someone who has said, if they have a functional offense, I believe they're going to be a really good competitive team in the Big Ten. I think it's worth going through Michigan's schedule at least to talk about this, because they don't play Illinois, so we're not going to see them head to head. But
here's the thing that tipped the scales for me with Michigan. And I don't know if I'm the only one, but I don't think they're going to beat Oklahoma. So if they don't beat Oklahoma, they start off the season on the wrong foot. And in order for them to get, and I already penciled in a loss with my bracket to Ohio State at home. So that means they've got to be undefeated for the rest of the Big Ten schedule. And they're on the road at Nebraska. They're on the road at USC. They have a pretty tough schedule, and they're not proven yet. So I thought that this looked like more of a 9-3 team than I did a 10-2 or an 11-1 team.
Now, here's also the interesting thing about this. Hypothetically, let's say they lose to Oklahoma, but then they do go on that run. They win 9 in a row.
Sure, that doesn't matter at the time.
And but listen. This is where it would get really interesting. And then they lose to Ohio State. It probably puts them in a tiebreaker scenario to be in the Big Ten championship game. And maybe they're in it depending on how the tiebreakers shake out.
Yes, if they don't lose another game, sure. Yes.
And then they're in the playoff.
Yes. No, they absolutely could do it. And listen, I don't know what do you think is actually more likely here? Illinois making the playoff or Michigan making the playoff? Because
that's what I'm wrestling with. I still think it's Illinois because I just don't know what Michigan's offense is going to look like.
You have to
Illinois, I know is good on both sides of the ball.
You have to suspend your belief of smaller program type players, or smaller program actually going out and doing it is harder to believe than Michigan figuring it out. Even though Illinois has really good football players and returns a team that won 10 games, it's still really, really hard to visualize, especially because Illinois got to those 10 wins in a not so easy path that they're just going to blow through the Big Ten. So if you think Michigan's going to be there, then that's not something that I would get fired up about in terms of saying that you're wrong. I'm just explaining to you why and my thought process was when I didn't put them in.
Yeah, I'm with it. I think Illinois.
Also mentioned too that I did this after they suspended Sharon Moore for the road game to Nebraska. That's
right.
That's a little wrinkle in there too. They have to be Michigan has to be fully back for them to make the playoff with this schedule. And I think Oklahoma's going to be good. So
Illinois, Michigan, Iowa all feel like if things shake out a certain way, they could be in there in this spot we're talking about.
Yeah, and as we said at the top of the show, the difference between Team 3 and Team 2 in these conferences and Team 2 and Team 5 is not as big as it used to be.
Well, and that's what it makes me think about the Tony Petitti idea for the play-in games. I kind of want to see those in the Big Ten, 6 versus 3 and 4 versus 5, because I think 6 and 3 might not be very different.
So this just is kind of a reinforcement too that I think I like Illinois' season team total over.
Yeah.
I don't know that I love the 8.5 Michigan thing. Is that's staring you right in the face of hey guys, this is probably going to be a 9-3 or an 8-4 team, and I think that's probably where they're going to be this year.
Yeah, the Illinois one, the over under was easy. You made the best point. If a disappointing season cashes the over, which in the case of Illinois, if they go 8-4, it'll be considered a disappointing season. You take the over, but that doesn't mean they're going to make the playoff. But I'm fine with this, and I'm going to wrestle with Illinois in my bracket as well. I think that's going to be. I've got to figure out, do I want to put them in there or not? And I don't know. I mean, I've got them ranked there, but it's tough because you could really go a lot of ways with this, or you could go, and this is, you and I talked about this offline, a second ACC team. Clemson's the only ACC team you have in this bracket right now, and I think Miami could be good. I think Louisville could be good. SMU should be good again. I think there are options if there's a second ACC team.
And I look forward to seeing what option you use on your bracket, because I bet you it's going to be the same option I use, which is 0.
I might not.
Yeah, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's hard because you have to put yourself in a position to think okay, which Big Ten or SEC team's not going to make it for the second ACC team? I know it happened last year, but that was a pretty unusual circumstance that led to it.
Well, okay. Can I ask this? And given what we thought this would take some, rather extraordinary circumstances. Let's say Clemson is really good and wins the ACC title. Miami is 10-2, but one of the losses is Notre Dame. Or how about this? Miami's 10-2. The losses are Notre Dame and Florida, and they go undefeated in ACC play, and then play in the ACC title game and lose to Clemson. Do they get in? I don't know if they get in that scenario.
I don't know that they would. But here's the thing. My prediction will be at the beginning of the year. I think a 3-loss team will make it this year. I think last year we all brainwashed ourselves into thinking that they have to be 10-2 or better, and that's not the case. There were a few teams that came out of nowhere and had extraordinary seasons that got them to 10 wins, or that got them to the 10-2 benchmark. But that's not going to be like Indiana's not going to be 11-1 every year.
I think that's going to be. Happening. I think you're right about that, because I also think that the Giants conference schedules and just the randomness of them, you may just have a year where there aren't a lot of 10-2 teams, or maybe there are not even enough 10-2 teams to populate the playoff.
Right. And and then when you start dipping into 9-3, that's when chaos begins, because deciphering between 10-2 and 9-3, there's so many more 9-3 teams than 10-2 teams.
Exactly.
Duke okay, so you have Boise. I don't even think they were ranked.
Yeah, you have an Ashton Genty-less Boise State occupying the group of 5 slot in there, and look, we're back to assuming they're the number 12 seed.
I don't think they're ever going to be a top 4 seed again.
Interesting.
I don't think a group of 5 team in this system will ever be a top 4 seed again. I don't think they should have been one last year.
Well, that is another argument for another day. And also may not have to be an argument this year, because we don't know what they're going to do with the seeding. The thought is they're going to change it anyway. So who else? You mentioned Memphis, Tulane, which UNLV. Lost its quarterback, Darian Mensah.
UNLV lost their best player. I mean, it's hard.
And their coach.
Memphis was one of them. Yeah. Well, hey, by the way,
UNLV has a very good coach coming in.
Games. So their new coach was made for that job, by the way. Dan Mullen, I think, is going to do good there.
Yeah, and he's got Alex Orji from Michigan, who, listen, go back and watch some Chris Ralph from Mississippi State. Dan Mullen knows how to use Alex Orji.
Yeah. So this was difficult. I put Boise in as a placeholder. I don't know if that's actually 100. It's just like the Big 12.
What if it's Navy?
It's not.
Come on. Raymond says in the chat, hot take, Navy makes a 12-team playoff. That would be incredible.
I just feel like whenever Army and Navy actually end up playing really good teams, they just can't keep. I just don't think they have the caliber of athlete to do it. It needs to.
Well, not beating Notre Dame is not going to knock you out of the playoff.
I mean, losing 42-10 does.
Maybe.
I mean, both of them got annihilated last year, and then that was it.
Yeah. We'll see.
I also think that when Notre Dame
remember,
beat them by 50,
Ari, if they win the championship of their league and they're ranked higher than the champions of the other leagues,
but
they're in,
because the champions of the other leagues won't have been blown out by the best team they played. That's how it works. Like Boise last year was a perfect example.
But I think that Boise State Oregon game did a lot of work.
Yeah,
like you have to be lucky enough to have scheduled a team that's going to be really good in the other conferences,
and then also lose to them by a respectable margin. Like if you win the American, but your only game against a bona fide.
By the way, Ari,
lost. It's hard to be the highest ranked one. That's all I'm saying.
Remember who Boise State plays on October 4th?
I looked at their schedule. I was doing this. Let me go. I don't remember October 4th.
They're at Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I think that's the reason why I put them there, because they lose to Notre Dame on the road by 10. It legitimizes.
But they don't have Ashton Genty, so they might not lose by 10.
I know they might lose by 50. I don't know. We'll see.
I can't wait.
A group of 5, a team you pick. It's hard. It's hard.
Oh, I know. That's the other thing is because I really want to go super hot and pick somebody from the Sun Belt. Like we had Colin Wilson on, and we did our Southern Miss Sun Belt champ.
But don't you have to pick a team that actually plays a legit Power 5 team? Because I feel like at the end of the year, there are 5 group of 5 champions, and you're trying to figure out which one's going to be the highest ranked one. And a lot of times the answer to that question is which team hung with the big boys the best.
Well, I think that's the tiebreaker for sure. Yeah. So yeah, it would be hard. Like now Southern Miss plays Mississippi State, but Mississippi State might be the last place team in the SEC, so that probably doesn't count.
Yeah, my thought was Boise wins their conference, they lose to Notre Dame in a respectable game, and I don't think with Ashton Genty gone, I don't think Boise State is going to be as much of a guarantee as you think it is. I just don't know that Ashton Genty was 97% of their team either. I thought they were a pretty.
I think he was at least 75% of it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I mean, they won games last year where I guess he had a great game. I don't know. Maybe you're right.
He was unbelievable against Oregon last year.
You should have voted for him to win the Heisman.
Yeah. So that is where we're at. It is going to be so much fun. Now you've got
respectable bracket though.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it. And the thing is, we haven't talked as much about the games deeper into the bracket because at that point, for me, it's a bunch of really good teams playing each other.
Yeah. If you want to get mad that I have Penn State losing, beating Notre Dame and losing to Clemson, then that's your prerogative.
Like I think a Texas-Clemson national championship with the rosters those two teams have, with Clemson being significantly better defensively than the team that Texas beat in the playoff last year, I think that would be a fantastic national title.
The one thing that you will see with my bracket, and if you are unfamiliar with my game, I want to explain it to you. If you look at the seeds, it all correlates to which teams I believe have the best collection of talent. And then as you go down, and like how we arrive at that is different than it used to be. I used to just go look at the, rankings of who, and do it. But like now it's who's returning, who's going to be a draft pick next year, who's been productive, who's been impactful. And like Texas has 4 players that you could have conceivably put in the top 10 of total players in the sport. And it's like, of course, I think they're going to win now. Like, of course, because they've got the most good players,
And Ohio State has maybe the best single player on defense and the best single player on offense. We'll close with something from the Wolverine scoop. We shouldn't be upset that Ari picked Ohio State to beat Michigan because every time he does, we win instead. There you go. See, even when you make people mad, you make them happy. And that's the beauty of you, Ari.
I did you a favor, buddy. I did you a favor. I'm wishing you all the best. Didn't have the greatest track record of picking the Michigan-Ohio State game properly the last 4 years. Sorry I didn't see one of the most remarkable turns in the history of our sport happening before it happened. But, that's the thing that blew my mind about that whole thing, too. It's like at the beginning, there's a clip that they used to show. And it was back on Stars Matter, the old athletic recruiting podcast. And it was after Michigan won the first time of the 4, or it might have even been before that. But somebody asked me if you think that Michigan would win 4 of the next 10 Ohio State games. I said I would bet my entire livelihood that they would not win 4 of the next 10. And like now they've won 4 in a row. So thankfully that wasn't a bet, and people love to throw that back in my face.
Oh yeah.
Like,
the video is floating around after Michigan beat them last year.
Listen, Andy, and this is the thing that I know that fans don't think about process the way that we do, and they just think about result. But at the time that I said that, NIL hadn't happened yet or was on the verge of happening. Michigan wasn't a full participant of NIL. Ohio State was signing top 3 classes every year, and they had won 18 of the previous 20 games. What math should I have been doing to see this coming? Like that's the thing that when people like throw stuff in your face, like, that is the beauty
of that is the beauty of the game and of sports. Like you're exactly right. You're exactly right. You did everything process-wise correctly.
Yeah, you're just looking.
Sometimes weird stuff happens, and it's like, awesome.
If process was infallible, we would be very rich. But like being like, ha ha ha, you were wrong about Ohio State, Michigan is such a funny like flex. Everybody was wrong. That's not something that anybody projected. It was an anomaly. It doesn't happen. It didn't happen. It's the first time it happened. Yeah,
Scott in the chat. How many DoorDash Slurpees is your livelihood worth?
I mean, I do okay. I mean, probably quite a bit, but it was like $9. I didn't, by the way, just so you know, because we didn't update people, my wife was out of town on Saturday night, and I had the night to myself, remember? I dropped my daughter off at my mother-in-law at 3 o'clock. I went out and worked out vigorously, as hard as I possibly could, from 3:15 till 4:15. Then I went home, took a shower, nice steamy shower, guys. I just want you to picture that.
Lots of good ideas generated in that. Okay, got it.
Some about football, some not. And then I laid down in my bed from 5 p.m. till 2 a.m, fell asleep, and didn't set an alarm for the next day. I didn't go to the casino. I didn't do anything. I just laid there and watched YouTube videos of like classic cars. And it was incredible. And I also had a very like balanced and healthy dinner. So it was like a slob day, but also yeah, Buck.
It's an evolved slob.
Lots of soap. And for God's sakes, would you please stop soaping your ass? Like that, from Mr. Deeds. I don't know if you got that reference, but yeah, it was a responsible, relaxing day without being detrimental to my health, which was like a first for me. Because usually when like my skinny workout 7 times a week wife is out of town, that used to mean like Domino's is coming because she would never come when she's home. No, I'm working at it, dude. Pool season's coming. Look at that. Boom. Okay, boom. And somebody said I outkicked my coverage on Twitter yesterday. And I'm like, I'm done with that shit. Okay. Britt is a very pretty girl, but like I'm an attractive man. Like I'm tired of this. Like, oh, look at the fat guy, got the hot chick. Like, we're not doing that anymore. We're getting the jawline back. I'm gonna be a snack too. She's not, I didn't outkick my coverage. I'm perfectly in my coverage.
You say so, Kevin James. All right. We have a very big show for you tomorrow. Our friend Clark Brooks, who is On3's deep dive stats guy, scheme guy, talking his list of the 100 most impactful players in the country. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating way to go into the 2025 season when you look at which teams have the most of these guys, but also why do certain guys show up where they do on the list. Sam Levitt is the highest rated quarterback. Dylan Stewart, the South Carolina edge, the number 2 most impactful player returning in 2025. Number 1, I think you know who it is. It's Jeremiah Smith. But we'll have Clark explain exactly why Jeremiah Smith is such an alien. It's going to be a fun show. We'll see you tomorrow morning.